Chapter 13 of Barnaby Rudge. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Barnaby Rudge by Charles Dickens. Chapter 13. If Joseph Willet, the denounced and proscribed of prentices, had happened to be at home when his father's courtly guest presented himself before the Maypole door, that is, if it had not perversely chanced to be one of the half-dozen days in the whole year on which he was at liberty to absent himself for as many hours without question or reproach, he would have contrived, by hook or crook, to dive to the very bottom of Mr. Chester's mystery, and to come at his purpose with as much certainty as though he had been his confidential adviser. In that fortunate case the lovers would have had quick warning of the ills that threatened them, and the aid of various timely and wise suggestions to boot. For all Joe's readiness of thought and action, and all his sympathies and good wishes, were enlisted in favour of the young people, and were staunch in devotion to their cause. Whether this disposition arose out of his old prepossessions in favour of the young lady, whose history had surrounded her in his mind, almost from his cradle, with circumstances of unusual interest, or from his attachment towards the young gentleman, into whose confidence he had, through his shrewdness and alacrity, and the rendering of sundry important services as spy and messenger, almost imperceptibly glided. Whether they had their origin in either of these sources, or in the habit natural to youth, or in the constant badgering and worrying of his venerable parent, or in any hidden little love affair of his own which gave him something of a fellow-feeling in the matter, it is needless to inquire, especially as Joe was out of the way, and had no opportunity on that particular occasion of testifying to his sentiments either on one side or the other. It was, in fact, the 25th of March, which, as most people know to their cost, is and has been, time out of mind, one of those unpleasant epochs termed quarter days. On this 25th of March it was John Willet's pride annually to settle, in hard cash, his account with a certain vintner and distiller in the city of London, to give into whose hands a canvas bag containing its exact amount, and not a penny more or less, was the end and object of a journey for Joe, so surely as the year and day came round. This journey was performed upon an old grey mare, concerning whom John had an indistinct set of ideas hovering about him, to the effect that she could win a plate or cup if she tried. She never had tried, and probably never would now, being some 14 or 15 years of age, short in wind, long in body, and rather the worse for wear in respect of her mane and tail. Notwithstanding these slight defects, John perfectly gloried in the animal, and when she was brought round to the door by Hugh, actually retired into the bar, and there, in a secret grove of lemons, laughed with pride. "There's a bit of horse-flesh, Hugh," said John, when he had recovered enough self-command to appear at the door again. "There's a comely creature. There's high mettle. There's bone." There was bone enough beyond all doubt, and so Hugh seemed to think, as he sat sideways in the saddle, lazily doubled up with his chin nearly touching his knees, and heedless of the dangling stirrups and loose bridle rein, sauntered up and down on the little green before the door. "Mind you take good care of her, sir," said John, appealing from this insensible person to his son and heir, who now appeared fully equipped and ready. "Don't you ride hard." "I should be puzzled to do that, I think, father," Joe replied, casting a disconsolate look at the animal. "None of your impudence, sir, if you please," retorted old John. "What would you ride, sir? A wild ass or zebra would be too tame for you, wouldn't he, sir? You'd like to ride a roaring lion, wouldn't you, sir, sir? Hold your tongue, sir." When Mr. Willet, in his differences with his son, had exhausted all the questions that occurred to him, and Joe had said nothing at all in answer, he generally wound up by bidding him hold his tongue. "And what does the boy mean?" added Mr. Willet, after he had stared at him for a little time in a species of stupefaction, "by cocking his hat to such an extent? Are you going to kill the wintner, sir?" "No," said Joe tartly, "I'm not. Now your mind's at ease, father." "With a milintary air, too," said Mr. Willet, surveying him from top to toe. "With a swaggering, fire-eating, biling water drinking sort of way with him. And what do you mean by pulling up the crocuses and snowdrops, sir?" "It's only a little nosegay," said Joe, reddening. There's no harm in that, I hope." "You're a boy of business, you are," said Mr. Willet disdainfully, "to go supposing that wintners care for nosegays." "I don't suppose anything of the kind," returned Joe. "Let them keep their red noses for bottles and tankards. These are going to Mr. Varden's house." "And do you suppose he minds such things as crocuses?" demanded John. "I don't know, and to say the truth I don't care," said Joe. "Come, father, give me the money, and in the name of patience let me go." "There it is, sir," replied John, "and take care of it. And mind you don't make too much haste back, but give the mare a long rest. Do you mind?" "Ay, I mind," returned Joe. "She'll need it, heaven knows." "And don't you score up too much at the Black Lion," said John. "Mind that too." "Then why don't you let me have some money of my own?" retorted Joe sorrowfully. "Why don't you, father? What do you send me into London for, giving me only the right to call for my dinner at the Black Lion, which you're to pay for next time you go, as if I was not to be trusted with a few shillings? Why do you use me like this? It's not right of you. You can't expect me to be quiet under it." "Let him have money!" cried John in a drowsy reverie. "What does he call money? Guineas? Hasn't he got money over and above the tolls? Hasn't he got 1 and 6pence?" "1 and 6pence!" repeated his son contemptuously. "Yes, sir," returned John, 1 and 6pence. When I was your age I had never seen so much money in a heap. A shilling of it is in case of accidents, the mare casting a shoe or the like of that. The other 6pence is to spend in the diversions of London, and the diversion I recommend is going to the top of the Monument and sitting there. There's no temptation there, sir, no drink, no young women, no bad characters of any sort. Nothing but imagination. That's the way I enjoyed myself when I was your age, sir." To this Joe made no answer, but beckoning Hugh, leaped into the saddle and rode away, and a very stalwart manly horseman he looked, deserving a better charger than it was his fortune to bestride. John stood staring after him, or rather after the grey mare, for he had no eyes for her rider, until man and beast had been out of sight some 20 minutes, when he began to think they were gone, and slowly re-entering the house fell into a gentle doze. The unfortunate grey mare, who was the agony of Joe's life, floundered along at her own will and pleasure until the Maypole was no longer visible, and then, contracting her legs into what in a puppet would have been looked upon as a clumsy and awkward imitation of a canter, mended her pace all at once, and did it of her own accord. The acquaintance with her rider's usual mode of proceeding, which suggested this improvement in hers, impelled her likewise to turn up a byway leading not to London, but through lanes running parallel with the road they had come, and passing within a few hundred yards of the Maypole, which led finally to an enclosure surrounding a large old red brick mansion, the same of which mention was made as the Warren in the first chapter of this history. Coming to a dead stop in a little copse thereabout, she suffered her rider to dismount with right good will, and to tie her to the trunk of a tree. "Stay there, old girl," said Joe, "and let us see whether there's any little commission for me to-day." So saying, he left her to browse upon such stunted grass and weeds as happened to grow within the length of her tether, and passing through a wicket gate entered the grounds on foot. The pathway, after a very few minutes' walking, brought him close to the house, towards which, and especially towards one particular window, he directed many covert glances. It was a dreary silent building, with echoing courtyards, desolated turret chambers, and whole suites of rooms shut up and mouldering to ruin. The terrace garden, dark with the shade of overhanging trees, had an air of melancholy that was quite oppressive. Great iron gates, disused for many years and red with rust, drooping on their hinges and overgrown with long rank grass, seemed as though they tried to sink into the ground and hide their fallen state among the friendly weeds. The fantastic monsters on the walls, green with age and damp, and covered here and there with moss, looked grim and desolate. There was a sombre aspect even on that part of the mansion which was inhabited and kept in good repair, that struck the beholder with a sense of sadness, of something forlorn and failing, whence cheerfulness was banished. It would have been difficult to imagine a bright fire blazing in the dull and darkened rooms, or to picture any gaiety of heart or revelry that the frowning walls shut in. It seemed a place where such things had been, but could be no more, the very ghost of a house, haunting the old spot in its old outward form, and that was all. Much of this decayed and sombre look was attributable, no doubt, to the death of its former master, and